Meraki, to do something with soul, creativity, or love. Welcome to Meraki Mentors, a podcast featuring women who create. We interview creatives from every field and around the globe to discuss art, risk-taking, and what it means to live a creative life. Here's your host, Candace Howes.
I stumbled upon Rachel Eliza Griffiths' work a few years ago while researching multidisciplinary artists. I was looking for someone who works in media I'm most familiar with: literature, photography, and film. I was instantly taken by the careful emotionality of her work and fell in love all over again after reading her stirring account of the 2017 Women's March, which is an essay and photo collection titled "What Has Changed?", printed in the Georgia Review last fall. Rachel Eliza is especially interesting because she is both formally educated and self-taught in her respective media. And despite her many accolades, she is just as personable as your best friend from next door. Believe me, I was silently fangirling throughout this entire interview. And once you hear this episode, I think you will too. Okay, welcome back everyone to Meraki Mentors podcast. This is your host, Candace Howes, and I am overjoyed and so excited to introduce our guest today. We have the lovely and talented Rachel Eliza Griffiths, who is a renowned poet and visual artist. She's the author of 5 different poetry collections, and she currently teaches at Sarah Lawrence College in New York. So first and foremost, thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Candace.
Yes, I was so, and I always tell everyone whenever I invite a guest to the show, I always get a little nervous and I'm like, oh, they're probably like not going to say yes. So I can't tell you how excited I was that you would be joining us.
Absolutely. I'm excited about what you're doing. So just to chat and get to talk to you seemed like a good idea. So I'm glad to speak with you and to kind of connect with everybody who's listening.
Absolutely. And I will definitely say, I know I've obviously kind of followed your work and read your poetry for the past few years. I actually graduated from college in 2015. But I really became, I think, probably more aware after I read your incredible essay in the Georgia Review last year, which for anyone out there, if you haven't read the Georgia Review, I definitely recommend subscribing or picking it up at your local library if possible. It's one of my favorite literary journals, and Rachel Eliza did a fantastic photo essay as well as a written essay called "What Has Changed?" about the Women's March from last year. So I know it's on the website, so definitely check that out. But yeah, I really got excited with just your work and the versatility of it at that point. So definitely, I know, yeah, it's very great to be able to see artists. So many times, like, we are multi-talented in different ways, but to be that adept and that capable of creating emotional ties from one medium to the other. So I guess you can just start off by introducing kind of what different work you do and how you got started moving from that flow of writing as a poet to being a visual artist as well.
Okay, great. And thank you for asking me about it. I am one of those people from a very young age. I just always was kind of creative, from like painting on the wall when I wasn't supposed to, but to also just wanting to share stories. And I loved being read to and loved books and kind of was like, Black girl nerd. But as a child, nothing was more thrilling to me than kind of like making things. And so I don't really remember a time in my life where creativity and imagination wasn't part of how I approached the world, having a sense of wonder for the natural world, but also just people and stories and where people come from, or, why this thing is called this name or what this means, and then feelings too, like how to express and communicate my feelings has always been so important to me, and like processing the world and my experiences. So When I was younger, I think I was probably more visual, but I was always also trying to write. And like I'd show, someone like some scribble scrabble and then tell them exactly, the story for it,
Mm-hmm.
And then later as I, got older, I continued to work visually. And then once I began reading, which was really early in my life, I just fell in love with reading. And I'm still madly, madly in love with reading. I will just read anything, and I'm open to all types of books, no matter what they may be. I think, recently, and I'm saying like in the last 10 years, that's recently to me. I, began to, when I moved to New York, I started to photograph. I'm self taught as a photographer. I also
Mm-hmm.
paint and draw, and do installation stuff, but I always was writing. And so recently, there seems to be more interest in a kind of bridges between these different mediums of kind of, the photo essay or the lyric essay. And this is just wonderful for me because it allows me to kind of make all these bridges connect. Sometimes they connect and sometimes they don't. But I have to say, I've always kind of just, had visuals. Even my writing is very, there's a lot of imagery in it, a lot of images. And oftentimes, if I see something, that's kind of how I get into a poem or a story, is kind of visualizing it. And so, kind of exploring that allows me to get into starting to like think about a character or the lines of a poem. My poems are very lyrical, so sound and music is also important as well, and rhythm. But even painting, I think, and photographs have a rhythm and movement in them, whether it's a very quiet one or one that really moves you. There's something about that. So for me, really, I've kind of always worked with text and images from the get go. It can get really messy.
Yes.
So I like mess though. Mess is good. Good mess. This is not hot mess. This is good mess. There's a
Exactly.
difference.
Yes. You need a little mess for there to be good art. So yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I one of the things that really stood out to me with what you were just describing is how, poetry and that visual side of your brain coexist. And like on
Hmm.
one hand, like we're all used to poetry and obviously that there's images and that you see things, but it's really great to think of being a poet as someone who is also visual, because we always
Hmm.
assume that poets only see things in words and like how they think it should sound or be described. But it's great that you are a visual person, but you're also able to express that in your vocabulary as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain feelings that we have that happen, through sight that can't be put into words, and vice versa. Like there's certain things we read that we almost can't see them, except through language, and then like understand and comprehend them. And sometimes I like to just, um, I don't know, see myself as kind of actually a seer, which, has a spirituality to it. When you're a seer, you that happens across dimension, across genre, across mediums. And it's a way to be aware at all times that there are greater things and unseen things in the world than you, right? And you're trying to connect
Mhm.
and be a conduit for a lot of different things. And I often feel that way as being a conduit as far as as vision, seeing, whether it's an image with my eyes, but also whether it's something kind of that there has to be more work to like unearth it and expose it and pull it up. And that's through language. So more and more as in my old age, I don't really separate them as much as I used to, because before I was kind of OCD, like this is a picture, this is a poem.
Mhm.
But even poems have a visual quality why do some poems have a lot of empty space in them? Why do some poems look kind of like towers or bricks, or prose poems, or poems that actually have the shape of maybe the mood or feeling in the poem? And so um, there seems to be a relationship between all of those things.
When you're creating, whether it's visually or more lyrically, does it come kind of naturally to you that, something should be photographed rather than written, or something should be written in a certain way that is visual? Does it come to you kind of naturally where you're not thinking about it, or are these more kind of intentional efforts that you're making as you're creating the work?
I think it's a combination of both. Some things
Mhm.
are organic for me and I just know, and I really work by instinct and intuition. But that also means experimenting, and that also means failing. Like, I might think, oh, what will happen if I do this? And something might tell me, no, this is how it is. I don't have the same process for every project. It really is, it, the feeling or what I'm looking at or studying or exploring will sometimes kind of dictate what the shape or process may be. And sometimes just curiosity, like what would happen if I tried to photograph, this word, or do some kind of associative visual work with a poem or a video or something. Like, it's never just like I do the same thing every time. One, I'm not the same person with each project. I'm like hopefully evolved, or I've absorbed new experiences, I've read new books, I've heard new songs and music. And so all of that stuff that I absorb around me is then going into kind of each incarnation of the work. And so I like to really think of each thing as kind of having its own body. So it has its own unique systems of how it works together. And sometimes it doesn't work. And I just keep pushing it until I'm like, this isn't working. You need to just stop. Sometimes it's a matter of like, this really needs to sit on the stove, go do something else. And then other times it's like, you just haven't gone far enough in thinking about this or seeing it. And then what can help me? So it's really, working on a collection of poems. The process is a bit different from working on, say, prose or working on a photo essay. But I feel like like in the well, that water is the same water that I'm pouring into different. So is it like ice this time? Is it ocean? Is it river? Is this a little creek? Like, what is this feel like? And I really go from a
Mhm.
place of feeling. And sometimes I'll mess up, but and that's good. Like, that mess may become the seed for me to go do something else, or even just the process of not getting it where I want to be gives me space to think about what else it was trying to be, or that kind of thing. So I mean, I love all parts of it. I mean, it depends. When I'm under a deadline, it's not cute. But when I have
No.
time, when I'm on my own time, it's like, just play with this and not take it
Mhm.
so seriously. Like, the first try is going to be the end all be all, because the first time it probably really isn't going to be right. Unless you're someone wonderful and brilliant like Roxane Gay, who just writes amazing things, and just right away you're just like, oh, thank you. You get your fix.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
What would you say is there anything that kind of helps you when you're in that process where you're stuck, or where you feel like you
Mm,
have something that has great potential, but now you've got to go back and revise it, which for me is always like the worst part of the process. I'm always like, I don't want to revise, but I know it needs it. Like,
mm.
what gets you through that process?
Oh, Lord. Candace, I'm like, how much time you have today, girl? Because I mean, what gets us through a day, even? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, I mean, what gets us through our joy? What gets us through our suffering? What gets us through, all the things in between? I mean, when I get stuck, um, I try to kind of feed myself from other sources. Um,
Mm.
so I love music. Music is a way for me to really turn music on, and it helps me kind of like go backwards, kind of put my car in reverse and back up, and then see, oh, you
Mm-hmm.
missed a turn, it was back there. Or, you need to just sit here until the rain passes on the side of the road and then see, how much further you can go. Sometimes, I mean, one of the first and foremost ways I can kind of unstick myself is through reading. So I may go back to books that seem to just remind me of why I continue to do this crazy stuff. And
Yes.
I also will pick up something that I've been meaning to read, and then I kind of distract myself. So then I come back to the work and just have a little more space. I also love to eat. I'll go eat. I'll go do, like sometimes for me,
Yes.
it's as simple as like taking a good long nap or walk or spending some time with the friends and stuff, and then just, or films. I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
time these days to like Netflix binge. So I have to like live through my other friends who get to Netflix binge. But sometimes I'll watch a film or something that might, be similar to something I'm working on and be like, well, how did that artist, how did that writer negotiate the terms of that? Um, but there's so many things. I mean, I will hit up a museum or a gallery, whether it's a gallery or a museum that I return to see like one particular painting, and I'll stand there for a minute and have kind of church. Or,
Mm-hmm.
I'll pick up, biography or something of someone's story and just kind of, lose myself in that and say, okay, you can do this. Sometimes it's travel. I've just come back from traveling in Savannah this past few days along the Geechee Gullah corridor. And I'm just like, oh
Mm.
my Lord, like it's so amazing. And so that kind of charged me in so many ways, historically,
Yeah.
spiritually, culturally, everything. I'm good on shrimp though. Shrimp, I'm good. I ate so much shrimp
Yes.
and seafood. I was
I
so
am sure.
happy because I'm originally from DC. So when they're like, "Oh, you want crab legs?" I was like, "Do I?" I always want a crab
It's
leg.
like,
So,
yes.
so, so that was really beautiful. But the people there, when you meet them, they say, "I love you." That's just what they say. They say it to each other, and like they welcome me as family, not as a stranger. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting here in just like a space of love, thinking of West Africans who were brought here as slaves and who persisted, with their
Mm-hmm.
culture and their language and their music and color. And I'm just like, okay, whatever project I was stuck on, I'm ready to go now, and I'm working from a space of gratitude with that. I will be doing some hot yoga though, because shrimp life is real.
Yes.
I can't say no. I can't say no to the
Absolutely.
combo, Candace. I can't.
I I know. The thing is, so I love like my mom makes this tremendously just fantastic salmon,
Mm.
and I am not a seafood person, and
Mm.
like my mom is from DC as well,
Ah,
so she knows the whole thing about the crab legs and
yeah.
everything. But I've gotta get me something that's like a little meaty, like some salmon or some grouper, and then I'm good.
And then you're good. And it's all about the goodness. That's what it's about. So at the end of the day, you're like, okay, I feel good.
Exactly.
We just bonded. We
We
just
did.
bonded.
Totally. And you mentioned something that is, I absolutely felt it on a whole nother level. And you're talking about like traveling, and I've gone
Mhm.
to South Carolina many times, and I've had I don't even know the word, in a way it feels like a privilege, but it's also a little haunting, but being able to visit several different plantations. And
Mm,
I've just gotten the biggest obsession almost, like, I know it's a thing I want to do, of like almost taking a road trip and going to as many as I can, because there's something
mm,
about being there that obviously, like, it's haunting. It sparks your interest. You start seeing things and thinking about, how life was
mhm,
for all of these people.
mhm,
But it always gives me the sense that I have some type of responsibility to go out there and to create the things that are on my heart because I have some type of freedom to do so. Maybe not all the
Mm,
freedoms that, we still dream
mm-hmm,
about, but more agency than obviously our ancestors did. So it is interesting just talking
mm,
about how going to certain places alone can really fuel that creative space.
mm. Oh, I completely love what you just said. And I think for me in particular, you know, this word freedom, right?
Mm-hmm.
This word free, and it's a state of being. It's also a verb, like it's an action to free oneself, to free someone else,
Yes.
to free one's mind, one's body, but also to claim it, freedom, to be free as a state of grace
Mm-hmm.
seems really important. And um, I'm always aware that I'm sitting on the shoulders um, of many, many people. And that, I think it's Baldwin who talks about, the crown, like the
Mm-hmm.
price of the ticket, like it's been paid for. And at the same time, there's freedom to go forward in all kinds of ways, and that in some way, free also allows you to have a vocabulary that tries to articulate how that feels for each of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like my free, it may not be someone else's free, and that's what freedom, like that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're talking about civil rights or something, then freedom again has a meaning, and it's not different in some ways than I think the free that you and I are talking about. But
Mm-hmm.
um, for me, I'm always thinking of, how do I get more free, right? When I think I'm like, oh,
Yes.
I'm free, I always find these challenges, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
someone else's microaggressions or someone's just blatant, egregious kind of disrespect or something. I realize that I'm captive and reactive in ways that I thought I had kind of like outgrown or controlled. And
Yes.
June Jordan has this wonderful quote, sometimes I am the terrorist, I must disarm. And I
Mm.
just love that. Like, I love thinking about checking in with myself and checking
Absolutely.
myself when I need to, and also feeling free to check other people too,
Yes.
seems part of all of the kind of work. Um, whether that work is happening in a poem or an image that I'm making, being present. So there's some of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh man, there's so many things I want to say. Okay, where do we begin? What?
We're going there. We're going there,
Yes, we
Candace.
are. We are getting there. Let's do a detour in a sense, and
Sure.
let's talk about residencies because I have so many just wonderful souls and friends of mine who are artists, and they always struggle with, how best to make use of that time, and is this time needed, and how do we make this time for ourselves
Mm.
if we don't, have that opportunity. Just so many questions that you have in terms of, this idea of having a space to create. So what I know you've had an opportunity obviously to do a lot of very well-known residencies. What have you gotten from those experiences?
Well, I think I have gathered um, a number of things in my own experience, and I'm only speaking from my own experience. And I will actually not name names or anything like that. But what I can say in general about residencies is that um, you know what intentions, what expectations, what hopes you have for your work. Is so critical when you go to a residency. I mean, for me, my own experience is they're usually highly productive times for me. And yet there have been some times where, I've gone somewhere and like the first maybe 3 or 4 days, I'm mostly sleeping because I'm kind of expelling daily life like out of my system so that I can make space to even hear my own voice on the page or visually. But then there are times too where like, you're at the residency and you're on someone else's timeline or schedule. Some residencies are different, but if you're at a residency where you have to eat on at a certain time and you're not used to that, you have to get used to that. We're human beings, so like our bodies and how we tend to make ourselves comfortable. What does the pillow feel like? What does the bed feel like? Like all of these kinds of things actually really matter because you are removed from what you're used to. And there are ways to kind of bring home with you, but at the same time, it's you're not home,
Yeah.
I think residencies are wonderful. And I think, I've met some really wonderful friends through residencies. And then there are other times where people only see me when it's time to eat because I don't want to talk. I don't want to be available in a way. I need to just be available for the work. And there are a lot of different types of residencies that can allow you more or less a vision. Some places are like show up. Some places make lunch for you and leave it outside your door, or you pick it up in the common room.
That sounds amazing.
I know, right? It sounds amazing, but it depends. It depends who's making that. No, it's nice, but some residencies want everyone to eat at least one meal, which is usually dinner together. Some residencies, have certain hours that may or may not fit with your own timeline. Some people work all night. Some people work only during the day and they go to bed early. It really depends. I think one of the things to keep in mind with residencies is that, it's like this question of time and how are you going to occupy that time? And I think sometimes there can be pressure where, oh, I have this residency and I have to make something. I have to get through something. And that doesn't always happen. And you feel very guilty, but you wonder, well, what did I need to read? Sometimes I've gone on residencies and I've mostly just been reading most of the time because I don't have that time in my day-to-day life to just sit around and read. Other times it's making notes. It's trying to have a re-entry plan for when you get back, which I think is really important. I think when you're on residency, you're kind of suspended from reality and you live in this beautiful bubble where it's so selfish. It's so great. It's all about you. It's really all about you. Right. And yet if you become too dependent on residencies and you just have all these reasons why you can't write when you're just at home, you run the risk of setting up this psychology in your mind where you can only work when you're away from your life. And so the challenge is on a daily basis or weekly basis, whatever terms you set for yourself of your writing life, your inner life, like how do you give that to yourself? How do you integrate that with your life? But I love residencies. For me, they're usually quite productive. I usually will work on multiple projects at one time, or generate seeds, even if I'm working on one thing, seeds for what I want to grow when I get back and work on. And it's just also the generosity that someone else understands what a writer needs, which is time and solitude and unplugging, and people setting up spaces for us to do that is so beautiful to me. I think the longest residency I've gone on has been 7 weeks. And there were some moments where I was lonely or, it was just so isolated that I was overwhelmed. I think also it depends who else is there with you. Someone getting on your nerves, suddenly no one has ever gotten on your nerves more than this one person. It's like, oh, this is, and you have to like check that. Like, what are you here? Like, not to get distracted by something that happens or what have you. So I mean, I love residencies. I'm a fan of them. It's wonderful when you apply and you get it. You just feel so happy and joyful that you're going to get the space and energy to work. It's really beautiful to have that. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of them.
I think it would be great to have time set aside. Like I've even noticed in my own life, like coming um, out of school, and you have all of the things, the ebbs and flow of your life. And I found personally that
Mm.
it's been hard for me to read the way I used to. Like I used
Oh
to just
yeah.
like sit in a chair for hours and just finish a book, but now I've had to be a lot more intentional about no,
Mm.
I'm getting up, and reading this amount in the morning. I'm going to stop everything I'm doing at this time in the evening and read. And you really have to
Right.
start putting that effort into play when you're in the middle of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes I just have like I'll get like a Google alert, like time to read, like reading block, and
Mm.
I have to at this point kind of schedule it in, and I'll usually have multiple things I'm looking at, reading, and so um, i- it's a space of meditation in a sense for me as well. So the reading may have nothing to do with anything I'm working on, and sometimes it's directly connected to what I'm working on, or I think it has nothing to do with what I'm working on, and then I'm like, oh snap, they got me. Like here it is. Like
Mhm.
this is what the unconscious has done. And also, I love, particularly with poets. I mean, I have stacks of books by new books by poets that I love and poets I don't know but have been introduced to them on the page. And so I also find it beautiful to, spend time reading what people are working on now. And then I also have my like old school playlist of books that I just constantly go back to, whether they're about craft,
Mhm.
of spirit, or just novels or biographies or art books. I look at those a lot too. So if I'm looking around my desk right now where I'm sitting, I mean, it's just, I'd be like, people would talk about me because my whole situation is just, there's just a lot
I
going
feel
on. I
that.
can just look like, you know, where's the IKEA shelf that could handle this right now? Situation is
Exactly.
real. It's real right now. But I also love that my inner life is so bright. And so when I look at this, I'm
Mm.
like, okay, inner life is good. Inner life is good. What will you make next?
Yeah. When you
Mm,
I know you mentioned like that you revisit a lot of books. Do you find
mm.
yourself um in a way, discovering new things, or is it more kind of reigniting, the flame that book, kind of sets in you?
I think again, I think it's a little bit of both for me. There are certain books that just always light my fires, and what's beautiful is that I'm never the same. It's never the same fire when I go back because I'm different.
Mm.
I could read a book today and read the same book tomorrow and see different things or put more emphasis on a character or scene or piece of dialogue that I didn't the day before. And then that can happen over a span of years,
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I'm glad I don't feel this way about my exes. Like, I'll just go back, but it's like, I mean, books are just they're just there. And I find them comforting and challenging. I mean, they can soothe me to just kind of go and look at books, but they also can challenge me, like, what are you doing? What's important to you? And I also just, when I'm trying to figure out a particular craft thing, uh, reading is probably the clearest way for me to understand what to do next in my own work is to read. And I would say reading probably even more than going to my graduate program, reading long before going to like school,
Mhm.
just helped me learn my own voice and things that I want to write about, people I want to write about and see, um, in the same way that I'm self-taught as a photographer. because you don't have people saying, oh, you can't do this or that's the wrong way. It's like,
Right.
I'm not waiting for someone to tell me. I'm like James Brown, like open up the door, I'll get it myself. I'm just going to do this and make it and see what happens. And, there's pros and cons to that. So,
Yeah. And I love this idea of not needing permission in that process and kind of creating your own thing. Like you have some very lovely videos that you have made for a lot of your poetry collections.
mhm.
And I think that was probably one of the things that struck me because one, first drawing, like, yes, to your words, but then seeing how you were bridging together all of these different mediums. I know I mainly studied poetry and like film when I was in school. So it was great to see someone
Mm.
merging those two things together and saying, yes, here I have written something. Yes, here it is consumed in the idea of, yes, that you sit there and you quietly read, but also, hey, we can take this to the next level and actually articulate, in moving form, the images and the ideas and the emotions of this book. So, in that sense of, not needing any direction, where did you kind of get the first idea? Was it kind of a playing around type of idea? Let me try this. How did you get to that point?
I think probably a few things. I think having a background as a photographer, um, I was interested at a certain point of like images being able to move, that I wanted to go past the still image.
Mm-hmm.
I know for the POP project, Pop, um, I have been photographing poets for years, doing portraits of poets. And one of the frustrations of that, because I'm also a poet, is um, how can this portrait speak to the interior self that I've met on the page? So how can this portrait in some way show the mood or some likeness in a kind of thematic way? Because the portrait that I find on the page as a poem of the poet, that usually doesn't translate to kind of the person sitting in front of you, and us both being like, oh goodness, this portrait, we're so conscious of our bodies and
Mm-hmm.
kind of the different tensions of being photographed by someone else, much less even like a selfie, like how do we navigate that? So at a certain point, I thought, how can I allow these portraits to do more than what they've always done? And in a very selfish way, I'm like, what would happen if I were able to use the same techniques of photography, like portraiture, to making these intimate videos where the poet gets to speak? We get to collaborate as photographer, and poet, rather than me sort of like taking the picture. Like, that's not an exchange,
Mm-hmm.
So the video allowed an exchange where the subject, quote unquote, got to speak, was able to speak and have a voice in the visual image. And so that was an exciting project. And I also learned a lot about kind of making videos, technically, and also just working with the form. I think also, and so that kind of got me thinking about associative visuals for my own poetry. I think the first lyric video I made for a book of mine was for Mule and Pear. And
Mm-hmm.
I loved working on that. It helped me see the book, the language in the book, the energy of the book, the mood of the book in a way that was really beautiful for me, as creating it. And it allowed it to have this kind of other life or other dimension in a way that could be shared with others differently than like posting a poem or something like that. So it also just allowed me to ask very fabulous, beautiful Black women friends of mine, will they, help me? And so then I brought in all these sisters, my sisters, and the book is about Black womanhood, Mule and Pear, and Black women's narratives. So it all was just organic and it was all working together, and then as I wrote the book, I mostly listened to Nina Simone. So it all just poured kind of into where it went intuitively. And so that whole process gave me so much. And it also made me feel like I was creating beyond the actual just final product of the book. I don't know whenever I publish another book of poetry, um, I don't know if I will do a lyric video, but they're so beautiful to look at. And also, when I was growing up, and I will date myself now, I mean, your whole life was about the music video. Like you
Yes.
watch BET, late night videos,
Yes.
MTV, the Michael Jackson videos are like a moment on TV, like like they
Mm-hmm.
were scheduled. Like you were sitting in your living room and your mama let you stay up late to watch the Michael Jackson video, like
Yes.
so, Janet Jackson videos? Are you kidding? Like, I would have pleasure principal whole choreography. Like, wait, pause it there. Wait. And, like, oh, wait, get the chair. We're going to I don't have any knee pads. Like, you got to be so, you could just see, there's just so many ways. So the music video and like, I mean, I would love to do music videos someday. But even now, like you
Mhm.
see digital videos. I mean, when you look at, Coloring Book or
Yes.
Lemonade or Whole or Solange, like there's just the video has been taken to the next level with music now,
It really
and so
has.
it really, really has, where you have these small films and things, and I think it's wonderful. And I'm interested in exploring that a lot more, actually. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I feel like I've gotten so far away from what you originally asked me, but that's kind of what's happened with video for me.
You mentioned music videos, and it's so true. Like having a lot of the short films, I do believe. I feel like Michael Jackson was a very big, turning point for that. Someone who's really
Mhm.
inspires
Mhm.
me today, I think, would be Karina Evans, who's done a lot of the music videos lately for Drake. She
Oh
just has a wonderful
yeah.
style, and she's so young
Mhm.
doing it too. Like it's
Mm.
incredible. It's just
Mhm.
incredible.
Mhm. It's so incredible too because I mean when I was growing up, again, like I think as I was graduating from high school, it was like AOL where you could hear the dial
Yes.
tone. Like the technology wasn't there. Like it's like the technology now where people can make whole feature films from an iPhone
Yes.
that didn't exist. Like Boomerang on even Instagram. Like there's access to the technology in a way that allows people, one, like you just do it yourself and make it, um and then see what happens. But even just making videos, 1 minute videos, 2 minute videos, or you can even just watch videos kind of like wherever. And now short films are such a form, like there's whole festivals and prizes and things for 2, 3, 4 minute films. I mean, now too, even fashion
Yes.
videos, perfume videos. I mean, the advertising is insane using videos. And there's a Kelsey Lou video I really love. It's black and white. I'm forgetting the song, but like there are just so many videos that I kind of have a whole kind of video file of videos that I go to for kind of just, it's similar to my like reading thing of like books that I return
Hmm.
to. There's videos I go back to over and over. Okay, Sade videos,
Yes.
okay? Like Sade riding on the horse in black and
Yes.
white with the white shirt, billow, like Queen. And wait till that album comes out. Soldier of Love. I was like, Sade can't get it
I am
wrong. Like,
excited.
okay, I'm so excited, like Maxwell is like when these girls levitated from the bed.
Mhm.
I was like, oh Lord, child. Look at these. I mean, and it was just beautiful, like the texture of the like and the different women, their different looks, like all of this. Like
Mhm.
it's just
It
gorgeousness.
is.
I don't know how many times now I've watched the This Is America video with Donald
Mhm.
Glover, like just studying, and they become like
They
text,
do.
right? Like people really are looking at them and dissecting them and thinking about them in ways that is completely different from when I grew up. So I think we're even just beginning to see the dimensions of what video can do. I mean, Kanye West had a whole, I'm going to speak his name
Yes.
for a minute, but he had a whole, with My Beautiful Twisted Fantasy. Like,
Yes.
I mean, that whole video. I mean, it's a film,
Mhm.
I mean, that was glorious. I'm not going to say anything
But
else, but
no,
I'm going to talk about
it
that. I'm going to talk about
is. And I think it's great because it's a work of art in itself, but it also completes the art. And I feel video
that.
heightens your
Mhm.
senses about the entire work in a way that you don't always get with just an image or
Mhm.
just text, not to make light of the two, but it just really, it
Right.
adds something to, like you said, all the detail that you look at and everything that you notice about that form.
Right. Right. And I think sometimes people feel as though they have to choose or privilege one above the other,
Hmm.
instead of maybe saying, well, let's just look at the relationship of what, one person is doing with this material, this content in this different
Hmm.
form, right? So, I mean, when people compare books and movies, the director of the movie, that's like the separate person from the writer. So to say, oh, the movie was better than the book or the book, it's like they're two different people. It's not like the same person made the full length feature film
Exactly.
and wrote the book, and like acknowledging like what was this director trying to do and how was that director reading the
Hmm.
book. This is their interpretation of the book. And so I mean, I think that's fascinating. That oftentimes I'm often asked, oh, are you more of a photographer or a visual artist? Are you more
Mm.
a writer? And then you just, and I'm like, that'd be like me being like, oh, well, if I need my kidneys or my stomach, it's like, I need both of these. Like, these are internal organs. They work in a system together. Sometimes I know what's happening and sometimes I don't,
Yes.
when I'm first working on things. But I think also once you just immediately out the gate trying to say which is better, you just narrow your whole experience of it. And there's certain movies I'm like, I preferred the book. I don't like the director's vision. It didn't work for
Yeah.
me. And then, it can go the other way too, where I'm like, wow, this movie has brought this book to life or made or focused on this particular aspect of this book I hadn't even really thought about when I read the book.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think it's all fascinating to consider and think about.
Absolutely. What things do you have on the horizon that you are excited about, if you can tell us?
Mm. So I am in the process of working on my first novel right
Mm.
now, which is a completely different creature than working on a book of poems or photographs. I find it very challenging in the best and most frustrating way. But I've always written prose for whatever reason. Career wise, poetry happened first in a way. But I think prose for me anyway, um, it it's kind of in if it needs a longer fermentation time. So when I was in graduate school, I studied fiction actually,
Mm.
and now 10 something years later, I'm finally feeling like I know something about the world to write a first novel. And this disrupted my idea of like, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to write my novel, I'm going to write my next novel. And the life, the work, everything was like, no, what you going to do is listen and wait. about 10, 12
Exactly.
years, and then you're going to write something. Then you're going to try to write
Hmm.
something and see if it works, see if it matters to you. So that's what I'm in the process doing. And, working on a novel, it's kind of like hiding under a rock. And yet you're trying to like bring the whole world in and make a world and make characters and not go crazy. So Candace, between not going crazy, eating shrimp,
Exactly.
let me stop. But it's like it's been a process. It's a process. And it's really exciting. Like, I'm in a process where I'm not kind of under the gun with, an editor or publisher or anything like that, but I'm still so close to the language and the story and the characters, and listening to them, that it's this kind of hard magic, though hard work, but then magical, that this is happening. And looking up and seeing like, oh, there's hundreds of pages, not hundreds, but definitely more than a poetry manuscript, and certainly very different from photography or videos. So that's what I'm working on now, is a novel, and they take time. um that's the plan. So we'll see what happens with it. Like, I'm on here like, oh, this novel. I'm gonna talk to you in about 10 years. You'd be like, what happened, Rachel Eliza? I'll be like, what
Exactly.
happened was that novel was. We'll see.
Well, while we're all over here on the pre-order list, like, wait a second, nothing's dropping yet.
Oh, you are so sweet. Yeah, I want to see that pre-order date. Ooh, I can't wait. Mm. Lord,
Well,
let's see. We'll see. We'll see. Work in progress. Work in progress. We'll see.
absolutely. And I love that you're always so enthusiastic about the process, because like you said, the process is hard,
Oh, the
but I
process
love
is
that you're
hard.
always committed to it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm committed to it. And like, there are days when I have the whole ugly cry. Like when Viola Davis was in Fences and just the snot and the whole, like, that's
Woo.
me. And then at the same time, I could be, Suge in The Color Purple swinging a tambourine around. Like, I can go
Mm-hmm.
through so much, but all of it, all of it is beautiful and necessary. And it's how life is, and
Yeah.
there's moments I grieve things, I celebrate, I curse and rant,
Mm-hmm.
I support and uphold and uplift. Like, it's just enduring. And I think, again, just obviously I love Baldwin, as many people I'm sure listening to,
Yes.
is, you can have all the talent and be as gifted as you want, but endurance and discipline at the end of the day, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what gets the work done. And first and foremost for me, it's getting the work done. It's the work, however long it takes. And there have been times where, I'm looking at something and I think, I can't do this now. I'm not ready, or I have to walk away from this. And that's hard too.
Mm-hmm.
And so not everything, half the things that I think I'm going to do, they sit in a journal written up as, to do or ideas or brainstorm aloud.
Mm-hmm.
My mother died 4 years ago, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna write poems for her and this and that, and I just couldn't. I could barely read. I couldn't write. I couldn't focus on anything. And that voice inside said, it's just not, you can't even begin to comprehend what is happening to you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and just let it be, let go of it, just stop. And I listened and just stopped. And then very, very
Mm-hmm.
slowly, here's one line, here's a word, here's something, and it's been like stone by stone, joy by joy. And, finally starting to write some new poems. But that was the first time in my life where I really couldn't write a poem. And matter of fact, I was like, I can't stand poetry. Why do people do this? And
Mm-hmm.
finally just letting go and being open and being vulnerable, I was like, okay, I'll never write the way I used to write because I'm not the same person now. Not having
Mm-hmm.
my mother in the world, how could I be? She's still
It's
here,
true.
she's in the world and me, but of
Absolutely.
course the poems are going to be so different, and they are now. And there's a joy in that, but the whole experience in arc, I'm still in kind of an unable to comprehend incomprehension of it. And at the same time, feeling grateful for all the ways that she prepared me to be the woman I'm becoming, you know?
It's
So,
beautiful.
yeah, no, thank you. It's so good to talk to you.
I know. I have enjoyed this so much, and oh
Good,
my
good.
gosh, this has gone by way too fast. Like we could have a whole season just sitting here talking about this. This
We be
is
on the
truly awesome.
phone. Oh my
We would.
gosh.
Our
I'm
phone
like,
bills would
I'm
be so
deep
high.
conditioning. Yeah.
Exactly. Let me
Yeah.
go put some chicken on the stove.
Okay. All that, all that.
Yes. So I will wrap up with our little Meraki picks.
Okay.
So these are, yeah, they're general, whatever comes to your mind, whatever is on your
Mm,
heart when you hear the question. That's
mm-hmm.
what we'll do. So what is a restaurant that everyone should go to?
I don't have one restaurant. I'm really bad. I mean, I
Mm.
think you should just go to a good restaurant. I prefer local restaurants so that you
Yes.
support your neighborhood. I think that's really important.
Mhm.
But I just moved out of Brooklyn into New York. So my world is kind of the restaurants I ate at in Brooklyn. Um, are are not are no longer like a part of my immediate life. And so I'm in a new
Yes.
neighborhood and I'm kind of like, what y'all got to eat, you know?
Exactly. That's the most fun part when you get to explore and
Yeah, so
like
I've been
find.
exploring. I get recommendations from friends who are like, you got to eat this, you got to try this. So,
Mhm.
Indian food, sushi, soul
Yes.
food. I mean, in New York, it's kind of like, what do I feel like eating? And then like either ordering it or going out, or I'm a really good cook. I'm actually going to brag and actually say that in an interview. Like I can cook.
Oh,
So I'm
oh,
like, I got it from my mama, but I
that's
can kind of
right.
I can kind of throw it down. So I'm really picky about where I eat. But the thing is, I just love to
Mm.
eat. Like, if you put it
Yes.
in front of me, I'm going to eat it if it's good,
I
you know?
yes. I
And
am
if it's
I'm so
bad,
with
I'm
you.
looking at you like, who made this potato salad? Who this? Whose
Time
red
to roll
velvet
up
cake
the
is this?
sleeves. Oh no, that is one thing you cannot mess up.
And you shall not mess it up. Not on my watch.
No.
Not today. I'm like,
No.
get your life together with your potato salad. Bye. So, no, I mean, restaurant, I mean, I also think it's beautiful when people just get together
Mhm.
and cook,
Yes.
just have it's the company of the people you're in that
It
makes the
is.
meal, wherever that might be, whether you're sitting out with friends in the park or you're at somebody's house or you're at the
Mhm.
family reunion
That's
or you're
right.
at a nice restaurant and it's your birthday. So, I
Yeah.
mean, all of that to me is kind of like the idea of eating. Eating to
That's
me is
true.
super important of what you put in your body.
That is right. And eating is so much tied to memory. Like hearing you talk right now, like that is an
Yeah.
important part.
Yeah, my mother had a fierce bread pudding recipe. Like, I can't
Mm.
even tell people about it. Like, I just make it. But when I make it, in that smell, it's the same smell. I just expect her to suddenly like come out and be like, "Oh yeah, you let that cook too long," because she'd be real critical. What you doing with the butter? But there's just something so beautiful in sharing a meal, and a lot of times our memories are like, oh, remember when we went to that place and you ate that thing and it made you feel that way, and who were you with, and let's go there again. Like I think that's like a simple thing that just we have all our lives of kind of like memories associated by food or meals, whatever that might be.
Absolutely.
This is a good question. I'm gonna be listening to all of these
Yes.
to hear because I'm gonna get my restaurant list together,
Right, I know. And they've
because I
been so
travel a
different.
lot.
Yeah, they've
Yeah.
been so different and so very like, yeah, it's been great for me too, just hearing them.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. Okay, so are there any songs, or if even not a song, like an artist that you've been
Mm.
rocking lately in your earphones?
Mm. So I'm gonna again probably date myself, although I find this person is timeless. I'm listening to a lot of Stevie Wonder right now.
I love Stevie.
Particularly the song As.
Oh my
I'm
goodness, you did
just
not
like,
just say that. That is playing at my wedding. I have decided it.
it's so beautiful.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. And then also the song Overjoyed by him too, that I really, it just makes me smile.
Hmm.
Like
Yes.
first thing in the morning lately, I've played it while I'm kind of like brushing my teeth and get myself together. And I'm just like, wow, just his voice and kind of I found that anywhere I've gone, whether it's in Paris or Savannah or Mississippi or LA, like that Stevie comes on and people just like something happens. And so
Hmm.
as I'm starting to work on these poems about my mother, I mean, she just jump up and start clapping her hands and do her little two step because she had these little bony legs. She do her two step when that Stevie comes on. And so that reminder to dance and smile and that there's no separation, until the day that I am me, you are me, and I am you. It's like a line from Neruda's poetry. And
Yes.
so it's just this love song, but it's like a love song anywhere, like anywhere you are, you hear it. And I love most of the versions of it, like that George Michael, Mary J
Hmm.
version. I love that one too. Like that, there's just something, and the fact that the song is so long, like you can just have a whole moment playing that song.
Yes.
And just Stevie in just every way. I'm like, I just really,
Yes.
and then I'm always just listening to all kinds of things. I mean, things that I also listen
Mhm.
to a lot are like Billie Holiday, Nina Simone. I have listened maybe 2 weekends ago from was like, listen to the whole Cardi B, just listen to it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to Cardi. I'm gonna see what this Bodak. Let me see that. Like I will just listen. But since I also am
Mhm.
just coming from Savannah, I've been listening to a lot of Gullah Geechee rhythms and
Mhm.
kind of ring shout. And that's been really beautiful to just no music but just clapping and voices that sound so old. It just really I just feel grateful that I kind of that's my lineage, those voices.
Absolutely. Okay, the last one, I know for me it's the hardest. So, as much
Mm.
as you read, you'll probably think of a lot of different things, but is there any quote or even piece of advice, maybe something you've heard from a family member that you kind of live by that kind of drives you in those hard moments?
Um Goodness. No, you're right. Earlier I mentioned June Jordan.
Mm.
Her quote, sometimes I am the terrorist I must disarm, which I find
Yes.
beautiful. There's a lot of, I return frequently to Audre Lorde. I even, Rilke's Young Letters to a Poet is something I read frequently. But also,
Mhm.
I remember when I was a young girl, um, one of the times when my mother was ill, we went to the hospital and they were kind of like, this is it. And I was like maybe like 12 or 13 years old. And I came in the room and there's like all these machines around her and everything. And she looked so little. She looked like a child in the bed. And, I was really scared. And, I held her hand and she just said, you're stronger than you think. And I mean, I think
Mm.
for me, when I'm in vulnerable situations, and even when I'm feeling, happy, which is most of the time I feel happy. I feel like there's a lot of work we all need to do, whether it's, intimately with ourselves and our own direct relationships to others. But then this whole country right now, I just had to resist using a four-letter word, but this
Yes.
this whole, I'm not going to curse on the podcast, but that this strength. And for me, the word stronger holds so much. And when I get overwhelmed, I just hear her saying it, and I think I see her with all of these things attached to her body, and yet her spirit and what she gave and how generous and smart she was, and how she loved. She loved really fiercely. And so there's so many writers whose words I could quote to you, but I think with the work that you're doing and the conversations you're having, mothers, you know, I mean, they're mentors, they're friends, they're complicated,
Yes,
they can be
they
difficult,
are.
and
Yes.
yet, you get one, right? For better or for
Mm,
worse. So her
that's
saying
true.
you're stronger than you think also made me feel, oh, she knows me, she knows me.
Mm,
And
yes.
she's been pretty accurate these last few years. And so I return to that, whether I'm terrified to make a photograph or to write the next sentence or to have the conversation or to, say like, I'm going to be okay, takes strength. And I don't
Hmm.
necessarily mean the kind of strength that erases us and makes people not see Black women, because everyone assumes we're so powerful and strong, which we are.
Right.
But at the
Yes.
same time, it's like we're made of blood and bones, We can take so
Hmm.
much and give so much. So I think that's the thing that I would say to whoever is listening. You're stronger than you think. And then also, when I was in Savannah, I went to church on Sunday, and at one point there was a moment where we were told, "Look at your neighbor and tell them, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it." And I just thought that was so beautiful. Turn to your neighbor and say,
Yes.
I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so I am going to be just loving up on people all around New York and wherever I go. And they're just going to be like, who is this crazy Black woman? I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I love the power of that. And I love like the freedom. That's freedom. That's like, okay, and action, like everything. So I think this is going to
Yes.
be the thing I'm going to do to like scare high school students, because they scare me because they're just big and smart. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm old. So I'll be like, just welcome them, talk to them that way, make them laugh. And then I'll be like, okay, like let's talk about poems now. Let's talk about the nitty
That's
gritty
right.
now. We're going to go there. We got
Yeah,
to. I don't have a
we
choice.
are. Oh, Rachel, Eliza, this has been a joy.
Thank you so much, Candace. I
Through.
really appreciate it. It's such an honor, and good luck with this beautiful project you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'm full of gratitude to you and all of the women who have been gracious enough to share the most important thing we all have, which is our time.
Yes.
Spread a little joy and, as you said, a little love across the airwaves. So I'm very grateful.
I can't wait to listen to everyone. I just cannot wait. Congrats. This is great.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
You've been listening to Meraki Mentors Podcast with Candace Howes. We're honored you chose to spend your time with us today. To learn more about today's guest or the podcast, visit MerakiMentorsPodcast.com.